Hello everyone, it is Zach GP here with another post FP2 F1 Fantasy final thoughts video for the Dutch Grand Prix. As per usual, in this video, I'm going to give you hard and fast information that you need to make the best teams possible and use the best strategies possible for all of your teams out there. And as usual, to my left, you can see all of the points needed for every asset to increase or decrease in value after the Dutch Grand Prix has finished. And if you want to see this data again, you can always visit in on F1 Fantasy Tools as well, as they are the best for finding out this info. But without any more shenanigans, make sure to like and subscribe. And let's get into the first part of the video, which will be the drivers and constructors do's and don't list. And just remember, if I do not mention a driver or constructor in this list, that means you do not bring them in to your teams. So we'll start off with the A-tier drivers. And again, as per usual, for the last basically our entire season, the first driver on this list is always Oscar Piastri. He's so much cheaper than Lando Norris. He's getting you very similar points. He lets a lot of people get into those 4A builds or bring in the best B-tier drivers out there, or have McLaren and another second A-tier constructor. So for me, Oscar Piastri is always the clear-cut, consistent best choice for an A-tier driver. However, if you are not going for budget anymore and you really want to go for a differential to try to just go all in on points, then I would suggest going for someone like Lando Norris. From what we've seen so far this weekend, he doesn't look too shabby. He did very well here in 2024 as well. So I can't say not to use him. It's just his budget is gonna be difficult to increase. So it very much is, if you're around the 115-ish million range and you don't think you're gonna reach the 4A builds until the end of the season when it's too late, then potentially go for a differential like Lando Norris. Then again, George Russell is another driver you could easily use this weekend, but again, I'd recommend it only if you have two A-tier drivers, as I wouldn't recommend using Russell over Piastri. But if you could afford to bring in Piastri Russell with two A-tier constructors, then it is reasonable to bring him in. And it's sort of the same situation with Max Verstappen, definitely with the two A-tier drivers. Again, I wouldn't bring him in over purely just one of the McLaren boys. However, if you wanted a differential on that side, he's looking good for driver of the day if he can just basically finish in the top 5. It's his home Grand Prix, and as we know, that's an extra 10 points. So 2 timesing that's an extra 20. It's a lot of points on the table for a driver like Max Verstappen. So keep an eye on him, because I think a lot of people will be going that way. However, 100% still is the differential to the McLaren boys. Then heading into the A-tier constructors, and again, everyone needs to have McLaren as their constructor, 100% dead set in their team. And then you've also got the likes of Mercedes. Now, I think Mercedes do look like the better option than Ferrari this weekend because of the lower temperatures, because of the chances of rain. It looks like if you want to free up some money, or if you have an extra transfer, then it looks like Mercedes would be the way to go. However, I should mention for the A-tier constructors, like last race weekend in Hungary, it's one of those weekends where there is no bad constructor to choose from if I saw any of them in my team. My personal favourites would be McLaren and Mercedes. However, if you had Red Bull, I would understand. Their pit stops have been getting better, so they've been getting pit stop points. And Verstappen's potential to do some magic at home, I could see why you'd go to the Red Bull route if you wanted a differential. And then even Ferrari, let's say if you don't have enough transfers to bring in a Mercedes, it doesn't matter too much because they're probably going to still score around the same amount of points. So it's not worth taking a -10 to get rid of someone like Ferrari. So 100% I still wouldn't disagree with anyone still having Ferrari in their team. Again, I just think Mercedes looks like the better option right now. Then heading into the B-tier drivers, and we have to start off with the main two, which I expect everyone to realistically be having in their teams. There's no real reason not to, and it is Gabriel Bortoleto and Liam Lawson. Now, the first reason is both of them are price floor drivers, so they're 4.5 million. They physically, even if they DNF, because yes, they're technically both rookies, it's a little bit worrying if the rain does start to pick up, that they could crash out. But even if they do, your budget won't be affected. They can't go down further. However, also, budget improvement wise, they look like clear cut the best options out there, with Bortoleto needing -14 and Lawson leading -2. And not only this, but they have been really good in the last few races. In Hungary, Bortoleto got 24 points, Lawson got 10, and then in Spa, Bortoleto got 7, with Lawson getting 9. So they're still great drivers for points. It's a no-brainer to have them in your team. Then for the others that you can use in your team, the first best option would be Fernando Alonso. The issue with Fernando Alonso is he's quite expensive now at 7.5 million, so don't ruin the rest of your team trying to put him in. However, if you can afford it, 100% do it. However, if you want someone like a Fernando Alonso who looks good on the budget increases and hasn't looked too shabby in the last few race weekends on F1 Fantasy points, then it would be Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz has got 6 points both in Hungary and Spa. So he's been getting decent points throughout the last few race weekends. And also, for him to get a budget increase, it isn't too much as well. He needs 10 points to go up 0.6 million, but only 4 to go up 0.2. So again, it's one of those situations, if you can't afford to bring in Fernando Alonso, you just drop it down to Carlos Sainz. And then we get on to the differential picks for the B tier drivers. So these are the picks where I could understand if you're bringing them in, but again, if you're looking to build budget, it isn't the right strategy to do. So it'd be one of those, if you're not looking like you can get to a 4A build, or you're not focusing on that right now and you want to just emphasize points, then you could go for the likes of Lance Stroll, Nico Hülkenberg, or Alex Albon. The reason they're all bunched together is because they are expensive. They're all valued at over 9 million, which is extremely pricey for a B tier driver. However, their budget improvements isn't terrible, so you could still hope if they had a great weekend that they go up 0.6 million. And hey, points-wise, in Hungary, Stroll got 13, Hülkenberg got 14, Albon got 12. They're doing good on points. It's just the issue of they will not be helping you realistically with your budget. So if you're physically only going for points, I would look at them as well. Now, one thing to mention about Stroll, however, is just be careful with him now. He does look like he's okay after that crash, but it's a little bit worrying going in if you're looking at picking Aston as a constructor or having Stroll as a driver as that differential approach. So just be cautious of Stroll, because yes, I do think if we get a little bit of rain, he's shown this year that he can give us quite a few good points. However, it is looking more risky now from what we've seen him do just in FP2. Then finally, on the B tier drivers, because there's been quite a few you can still use Colapinto as he is at the price floor, but he's not one of my favourites. He's not getting any points. He's had negative points in both Spa and Hungary. It's really where you're in a position where you just physically have to bring in Colapinto to fit the rest of your team. I could understand doing it, but points-wise and budget-wise, he doesn't look great. It's just because he physically can't go down any value. That's why he's still a decent pick if you have to use it. Then finally, heading into the B tier constructors, I recommend either bringing in Sauber, Aston Martin, or Williams, because at the end of the day, any one of those into your team, and they've all had drivers looking half decent this weekend so far. And I think the B tier constructors, normally every race weekend, I would be like, steer clear of them. You know, you want to go for a Mercedes or a Ferrari or a Red Bull. But this weekend, it has been looking ridiculous past FP2. Now, Aston Martin have their own issues of Stroll crashed out. That's a big issue to have them on your team. You also had Williams. Albon, he had a little bit of a crash, beached his car. But at the end of the day, especially Aston Martin, because at least we got to see Alonso's run on the softs, my oh my, does Alonso look rapid. And I just can't see the pace from the Mercedes, from Ferrari, from Red Bull. It looks like it's going to be another Hungary in the sense of I have absolutely no idea who's going to be fast, and we could end up with Aston Martin looking half decent. And let's get real, if Aston Martin do anywhere near as good as they did in Hungary, that will mean them with Piastri and Norris builds will actually be the way to go looking forward. So keep an eye on the B tier constructors right now. Are definitely into practice 3, because 100% I'm going to show a team with them in it, because I actually am looking at it as well now from how well in FP2 Alonso went. But it could be one of those weekends where we see a lot of differentials with Aston Martin as a constructor. Then heading into the chip section, I'm going to split this part into 2 sections. Of the first section for your normal team. And for your normal teams, it's normality again. Realistically, if you've still got Limitless, you have to start getting Limitless done. Otherwise, it's going to diminish in how much it gives you back each race weekend as other teams improve without using Limitless. So again, if you have a Limitless, just get it done and dusted. Again, no negative if the rain starts to pick up again. However, from what I last looked at, It doesn't look anything crazy on Sunday just now. However, if you did lock in no negative, I'd recommend doing this literally like half an hour before the deadline to make sure you have the most up-to-date weather reports. And hey, if it looks like it's going to rain, 100% could be used. Same thing for autopilot. However, I would recommend only using autopilot if you have a Piastri-Russell team, Piastri, Verstappen, Piastri, Norris, whatnot, because otherwise it's just not really useful having it with Piastri and someone like a Carlos Sainz or an Alonso, because it'd have to be an absolute crazy race where Piastri DNFs for it to be any use. And as always, final fix is still an option if we do get anything crazy happening in qualifying. But then onto the weird section, which is the mini league. Of course, there's a £2,000 mini league for whoever wins this race weekend, but I can't plead enough, do not ruin your main team pushing for this mini league win, as it's not the most optimized weekend to be using an extra DRS if you're doing that on a main team. However, if you want to push for it, I'd recommend using it in team 2 or team 3, one of the teams that don't matter as much, using a limitless if you don't have enough money to use an extra DRS to get to a Piastri Norris, Piastri Verstappen team with McLaren and Mercedes, or McLaren and Ferrari. As realistically, extra DRS without 2 A-tier constructors would still get less points than a limitless. However, if you had that extra DRS with the 2 A-tier constructors, it'd probably get more. The issue I have with this is most likely we're not gonna get just one winner. It'd be very surprising in a one race league that we get one winner. So that's why I say be careful of this league, because don't put all your eggs in one basket when that basket could have about 10 to 1,000 winners, and then they just randomly pick whoever gets that £2,000 prize anyway. But now with that all said and done, let's head over to the best part of the video, the team selections. So now heading into the team selections, we'll start off with those basic teams that you can look forward to heading into the Dutch Grand Prix. And instantly you'll notice Mercedes is the second constructor with these teams. From what we've seen from FP2, Mercedes as an A-tier constructor looked like the better choice out of Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull. Red Bull looked like a half decent choice there. Again though, Red Bull as a constructor wouldn't get the driver of the day points that Max Verstappen could get. So I still think it's a little bit risky with Yuki Tsunoda there. And Ferrari, I don't know what's going on with Ferrari right now. Then Bortoletto and Lawson, price floor drivers, budget increase. Fernando Alonso and Carlos Sainz, similar, however not on the price floor, look the best for budgeting. And at 108.7 million, this team basically is the foundation for every team moving forward that consists of 2 A-tier constructors. Now, of course, if you had a little bit more money lying around, you could go Piastri to Lando Norris and obviously put the 2 times on Lando Norris himself. Again, because Lando Norris has looked better so far this weekend, like I mentioned, I've actually got him probably winning the race. He's been looking very good in FP1 and FP2 so far. So if you have that around 113-ish million in the bank, you could go to something like this. However, if you can't afford 108.7 million and you need to go back down, I would go Carlos Sainz down to Colapinto. But again, like I mentioned, only in worst case scenarios. Then you could go to Alonso, to Carlos Sainz as well, but this is really if you've just started the game and you're around 100 million. Now, heading into the 4A builds, for anyone who does have the budget, basically over 120 million, then you can start looking at teams like this. So this is the team I would use minimum. So I wouldn't drop any lower like Sainz to Colapinto. I think you're pushing it a little bit too much there. But if you can get the money for 123.6 million to go to a team like this, this is where I'd start the 4A builds. Russell, again, looks consistent in and out every race weekend, and he looks like the only one sort of on it so far in FP2 out of the Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull drivers. So for me, it looks like a clear-cut George Russell being used there. And the only difference I would do for 4A builds this weekend is I would go Carlos Sainz up to Fernando Alonso. Now, this would set you back 125.2, but again, this is probably my favorite team if you are going to a 4A build this weekend. It would cost you a bit more, but Alonso looks better for that budget building potential and just how well he did in FP2. So this is my favorite team heading into the race weekend for the 4A look. However, if you have a little bit more money to play around with, you could then look to the differential play of bringing in Verstappen to try to get that driver of the day potential. And then again, if you want to go really, really differential, you could put Verstappen as a 2-times driver. I really wouldn't recommend it unless you want to go crazy and just really try for points. However, that's about as much as the 4A builds look right now. Now, heading into the final team I would recommend using this race weekend, and you have the Aston Martin differential team. So like I've spouted on this whole video so far, Alonso, even without the toe, looked really fast so far this weekend. Even Stroll without that crash has looked pretty good. So if you want to go for Aston Martin, even though it looks a little bit risky now with the Stroll crash, this is the way I'd go. Now, this is the most expensive team that I could recommend. It costs 126.5 million. However, with this team, you also have Albon and Alonso. Williams don't look too shabby as well. Both of them for points look spectacular. You'd be taking a hit with Albon on the budget, but I think when you've got Aston, you're sort of covering your losses on that ground. And then you also have one of Lawson or Bortoleto. It doesn't really matter that much who you have, just one of the 4.5 million drivers. And of course, still with McLaren. Now, if you don't have 126.5 million, but you still want to go to the Aston Martin builds, you can go down from Albon to Stroll for 125 million. Stroll down to Lawson or Bortoleto, whoever you did not have already in your team. And that will cost you 119.8. Alonso to Sainz for 118.2 million. Norris to Verstappen for 115 million, and that does mean that your 2 times will be going back to Piastri, as again, if you do have Norris in your team, I'd recommend 2 timesing him, because again, he's looked better so far this weekend. Verstappen to Russell for 109.2 million, and then finally, you could then drop Russell down to Alonso, and then bring back someone like an Albon or a Stroll to your team as well, with these differential teams. But just really, please do keep an eye on these heading into this weekend. If Aston Martin's pace continues over to FP3, you might be seeing me with a Piastri, Norris, McLaren, Aston build. That's how serious I am with these teams, and that's how interesting it looks so far in F1 Fantasy right now. And quickly, we'll just take a little look at the limitless team I would put out, and it would have Norris with the 2 times, Piastri, Verstappen, Russell, Leclerc with McLaren and Mercedes. Again, with Aston where they are we looking at potentially Alonso over Leclerc or something like that? Maybe too risky, but heading into FP3 for now, I would still go for a more generic limitless team. Again, if you want to go for a slight differential, you could go Verstappen 2 times or have Alonso over Leclerc. However, this is as basic as it gets for the limitless teams. But anyway, everyone, thank you so much for watching this post FP2 video for F1 Fantasy. We've got a lot to think about heading into the deadline. So as per usual, if you still have any questions about your teams after watching this video, make sure to comment down below and I'll try to get to all of them. I would say I get to around 80 to 90%. There are a few I miss. However, I really just want to help all of you out with as much expertise as I possibly can give. So make sure to comment down below if you do need any help with your teams, as I think a lot of people are going to need that help this weekend, because it looks like it could be very chaotic with the weather, with the Aston pace, with the Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull not showing crazy amounts, or at least Russell is but Antonelli isn't. It's all over the place right now, so I can fully understand. But as per usual, make sure to tune in to the live stream over on FanAmp if you want those final deadline thoughts with an hour to go from the deadline, obviously after FP3, so we've got that to look at as well. And thank you all so much for watching, because this video has been slightly longer than my usual post FP2, but it's just been so hectic in the F1 Fantasy space right now that it had to be a little bit longer so I could get my opinions down on everything. But anyway, like and subscribe, everyone. I'll make sure to see all of you very, very soon. Enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care, everyone.